Welcome to a Theological Dust-Up, hosted by Free-Thinking Ministries. I'm Dr. Tim Stratton, and today we have a special guest joining us all the way from Israel to discuss what's really going on in the Holy Land. But first, this show is brought to you by meadammo.com. If you need ammo for apologetics purposes, freethinkingministries.com has your back. If you need ammo for your next hunt or your next three-gun competition, I've got one later this week, well then meadammo.com has your back. I've got to tell you, I've been competing in the sport of three-gun competitions for several years now, and I've recently made the switch to Mead Ammo. Thus far, I've had absolutely zero failures. My son is a hunting guide up in Montana, and he's also committed to using nothing but Mead Ammo for his hunts. And not only that, I've gotten to know the owners of the company and some of their employees. They love Jesus and take apologetics and good theology very seriously. So make sure to give these folks your business. Check out meadammo.com and order your freedom seeds today. That's meadammo.com. meadammo.com. Well, next I've got to give you a heads up about an upcoming show that you don't want to miss. One of my closest friends in the field of apologetics and theology is Dr. Mike Licona. He just authored a new book that was just released today, actually. It's called Jesus Contradicted: Why the Gospels Tell the Same Story Differently. Now, I've been looking forward to this book because I've had many conversations with Mike over the past dozen years now about how God's middle knowledge and Molinism can explain biblical inspiration. So I had a tiny bit of influence over a section of this book. In fact, Mike even thanked me at the beginning of the book and cited my book, Human Freedom, Divine Knowledge, and Mere Molinism, in his new book. So that was a huge honor. Thank you, Mike. Now, Mike's views are not without controversy. I don't want to merely give my friend softballs to hit out of the park when I interview him. So I want to grill him with the toughest questions. I mean, after all, what are friends for? In fact, I've already reached out to some of his most vocal critics to get some good questions to ask him during our conversation. But I invite you to either send me some questions to ask Mike, or better yet, join us for the live stream on June 24th at 7 o'clock p.m. I'll be fielding questions from the live chat for Mike to answer. So I encourage you to purchase Mike's new book today, read it, and formulate questions based upon it for Mike to answer on June 24th, live right here on Free Thinking Ministries. Now, Mike Licona and I, along with around 40 other theologians and philosophers, had the opportunity to travel to Israel for a 10-day trip back in 2019. It was so much fun, and it was really a life-changing event. And not only did we get to walk in the same dirt that Jesus walked, and well, actually, I was even on a boat in the same water that Jesus walked. That was cool. But much of our trip was educational in nature. We met with Israelis and Palestinians and got to see how things operated there firsthand. On my last day there in Israel, I had the blessing to meet with Eli Haitov in Tel Aviv. At the time, Eli was an aspiring philosopher who had formerly served in the IDF, the Israeli Defense Force. He is Jewish and a Christian and is committed to thinking deeply about God and theology. Now, since that meeting, he moved to Southern California for a while to pursue and attain a graduate degree in philosophy from Biola University. He worked closely with J.P. Moreland, one of my favorite guys, and he and I had the opportunity to meet at some EPS conferences during that time. That's Evangelical Philosophical Society meetings. Now, since graduating with his philosophy degree, our guest today has moved back to Israel to prepare for more service in the IDF. as Israel is now at war with Hamas. Well, today we're going to hear what's really going on in Israel from a guy who actually lives in Israel. So without further ado, please welcome my good friend, Eli Haitov, to the show. There he is. How you doing, Eli?
Hey, I'm doing great. Thanks. Great to be with you too.
Man, it's so awesome to have you here on the show. I've wanted to have you on the show in the past just to talk about philosophical issues, because you and I are really kind of cut out of the same cloth when it comes to philosophy and theology. We're both Molinists. We love free-thinking arguments. We've both been sharpened by guys like William Lane Craig and J.P. Moreland. And I do want to touch on just a few of these things today, but I want to spend most of our time educating our viewers about what's really going on in Israel, because I got to tell you, I only had 10 days in Israel, and I hear what's being said by so many media outlets, and I'm just like, that's false, that's false, that's false. I've been there. I know this is wrong, right? But you've been born and raised there. You have a much different perspective for us to learn from. But before we get into, the war that you're currently involved in and things like that, tell us a little bit about yourself, and then tell us, what drives you philosophically and theologically before we get into all that other stuff.
Yeah. So again, my name is Eli. I'm 27, married to my wife Johanna. We have a 9 month son who's giving us a hard time in the nights. Yeah. So I just came back from the States after finishing my MA in philosophy, which was a great experience, really. And right now I work for One for Israel ministry, which basically is an evangelistic ministry. We evangelize to both Jews and Arabs. And also I teach, we have a Bible college in Netanya, and I teach theology and philosophy. And that's basically my life right now.
Wow. So tell us, where were you born and where were you raised? And give us a little bit of your educational background before you went to Biola.
Yeah, so I was actually born in Uzbekistan, in the capital city Tashkent, and we came to Israel when I was 7 months, so I don't remember anything. But so I grew up to a Christian family, and as soon as I became 13, I just discovered Christ. I just read the New Testament. I read the Sermon on the Mount, was convicted by my sin, and I just believed in the gospel.
Really?
And really quickly, I became, I started doubting my faith, because I had a mentor actually who would answer my questions, and when I challenged him, he would just provide the best answer I could find. And one day he just became an agnostic, because he started studying brain sciences, and he started saying there is no soul, there is no God, there is no evidence for these claims, and the Bible is immoral. We have genocide in the Bible, slavery in the Bible, and I just couldn't answer those objections. I didn't know what to do, and basically I found William Lane Craig and J.P. Moreland's books and debates, and they just changed my life. I just found the answers that I was seeking, and I just understood that that's what I want to do. I want to study the deep questions. I want to help others think about those questions critically and find the answers that satisfied me. So that's what I try to do today.
Mm-hmm. What's it like being a Christian in Israel?
Yeah, so in Israel, we would call ourselves Messianic Jews,
Right.
Because the name Christian has bad associations in Israel. It just reminds everyone of the Crusades, and even just Catholics and stuff. You believe in weird stuff. That's not for us. We're Jews. So we just want to show them that that's the most Jewish thing you can do. Like Yeshua is the fulfillment of the Old Testament prophecies. So when you believe in him, you're not becoming a Gentile or something. You're not becoming, you're not converting to a new religion. It's actually what God meant in the Old Testament, that you should believe in the promised Messiah. So And yeah, so it's challenging to be a believer in Israel in the sense that it's not popular. People are especially those who come from religious background. If you believe in Jesus, your family just doesn't recognize you anymore, even in those circles. But we do have also the secular side, and that's what I aim at. And in my apologetics, I want to reach those Israeli atheists, and I've actually debated some in our college. I had
Mhm.
2 live debates with atheist YouTubers, and I actually used your free thinking argument.
Yeah. Free thinking argument made it all the way to Israel.
Yeah,
I'm blessed and
made an
honored. Thank
aliyah.
you, brother. What's that?
It made an aliyah, as we say. Aliyah
Yeah.
is like not.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, yeah, JP Moreland has had a big impact on me in really kind of formulating at least this, I would say even at the very beginning, kind of helping me formulate the free thinking argument. And recently had an opportunity to co-author a paper with him. And I feel like we really made it stronger. But you at Biola, he kind of mentored you there, didn't he?
Yeah, that was one of the best times I had ever had in my life. Like being with JP and being his TA for 2 years and meeting with him in the office hours, and just visiting him in his house and talking to him for hours. Just a life-changing experience for me.
Yeah.
Both mentoring me, in a sense of teaching me like deep philosophy of mind, metaphysics, but also
Mhm.
mentoring me spiritually, which I truly needed in my studies of philosophy. So that was just great.
Yeah, he seems to have a pastoral side to him. He doesn't
Yeah.
just, I mean, he definitely cares about your mind, but he also cares about your heart and your walk with Jesus. And I've definitely benefited just through those kinds of emails with him and occasional phone calls, but had been just a wonderful experience to be mentored and sharpened by that guy and having office hours with them.
Has he ever called you an idiot?
I don't know if he has, but I can see him saying that. What's that?
Good sign if he did. Yeah.
Well, I love his sense of humor and how he doesn't pull any punches, even when he loves it. I have seen that, but man, so cool. So, do you have aspirations about further? You want to seek a PhD in philosophy, or what's your plans?
Yeah, that's what I'm planning to start applying next year. I'm not sure yet where. I'm looking at the options, but I want to pursue a PhD and studying just the topic of the argument from reason. I think something that has to do with philosophy of mind and the
Mhm.
argument from reason. I want to develop a new version of the argument, which I already have
Mhm.
in my mind. So yeah, that's what I think I want to do in my PhD.
Oh,
But
wow.
I'm open to other options also.
Mhm. Well, yeah, let's you and I continue to talk about that. I'd love to see you do that, and if I can help you out in any way, let me know. But I really think that C.S. Lewis, and he wasn't the first one to have these thoughts, but just the way he kind of developed his argument from reason, I think there's something there that it really is, if offered correctly. And I don't even know if C.S. Lewis um, understood how powerful it was, or at least wielded that argument as proficiently as it could have been. But he was, even though he kind of invented it, as it were. Um, I think it I think it's got what it takes to be the most powerful argument for God's existence. But that the ideas that drive it, that breathe fire into that argument, I think, man, I think it destroys atheism. And ultimately, at the end of the day, I think it, I think Christianity, it's not just theism in general, but Christianity rises to the top as the best explanation of all of that. But anyway, I'll bring you on in the future to discuss the argument from reason. How does that sound?
Sounds great.
Okay. Well,
Love
before you pursue your PhD, you're probably going to be serving in the IDF again. So I want to ask you about everything. I mean, you were finishing up at Biola when October 7th happened last year, and if memory serves, I immediately reached out to you, and we started talking about it, and yet you graduated, and then you went back to Israel, and you're preparing to be drafted. Is that correct?
Yeah, I probably will be drafted in October. I'll be in Egypt, in the border of Egypt, doing just general operations for a month. Yeah, so I hope I'll make it to EPS this year.
Yeah, so you are scheduled to present at EPS in November, and to hang out with me in person again. And by the way, you and I, we've been able to break bread in both Israel and in America. And in fact, when we were in Denver together, you and I had your wife and you and me had the opportunity to break bread together with Dr. Craig, just the four of us. And wasn't that a fun conversation?
Yeah, that was so fun.
Yeah. Anything you want to talk about, bring up with Dr. Craig? You speak to him quite a bit, don't you?
Yeah, we correspond. We've been corresponding recently a lot. Not a lot, but quite a lot. He has been asking me how am I doing in Israel and how is the situation here, and I just use these opportunities to ask him some philosophical questions, So I asked him some, because I teach I taught philosophical theology and systematic theology in my college. I had some questions about his understanding of the Trinity, because he said, like, he believes that there is one substance and three persons. But then I asked him, how do you understand each person? Because each person is not a substance, because then we get three gods. On the other hand, we don't want to say that there are modes. There are modes in of the substance. It's just sounds weird to say that these are modes of the one substance. So what are they? And so he started explaining. He said that he's still working on this subject, actually, and we have to distinguish between what he calls a mind and a soul in this context specifically.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, this is a question I'm still researching. So
yeah, nice. Well, it's I mean, it's so cool that you are connected so well to guys like J.P. Moreland and William Lane Craig, and that you're able to continue to to build upon their work and to bring it to people in Israel. But yeah, people, I mean, people in Israel, I know that you'll say they need the truth about Jesus. I'll tell you what, people in America, we also need the truth about Jesus, but we also need the truth about what's really going on in Israel, because, I don't always agree with Donald Trump, but one thing that he said is that the media is the enemy of the people. And after hearing so much that's being said, and also being there personally for that limited amount of time, but also having several friends in Israel like you, I know that these things that are being said in the media are false. And so, like I said, I don't always agree with Donald Trump, but I think he hit the nail on the head here. I think the media has been an enemy to the people, at least in this regard. Would you give us some truth about what's going on? Let me start out with a question for you, because I hear this all the time. Is Israel committing genocide in Gaza?
yeah, I won't be politically correct in this conversation. I'm sorry. I'm Israeli, so
Right. I don't want political correctness.
I don't so much care about politics. I care about reality, and I just want to tell your viewers the reality as it is. Okay, if Israel wanted to commit a genocide, it could accomplish it on October 7th. Okay, we didn't need to risk our soldiers to get into Gaza and call them to evacuate the places we fight in. The definition of a genocide is destroying a nation due to its ethnic background or racial or religious membership. That's not about it. We're not fighting the Palestinian people. We're fighting this horrendous savages, Hamas terror organization who just committed the worst, terror attack and the worst, the worst attack we had since the Holocaust, actually. And many just call it the 9/11 of Israel, and it is the 9/11 of Israel. This is the most terrible attack we have ever had. So Israel is doing everything it can to prevent collateral damage, okay, to prevent innocent death. And that's why we're using maps, okay? We're using maps splitting the Gaza Strip into hundreds of small zones, and we call the Palestinian people, those who are civilians, to move away from combat zones. Mm-hmm. So that's not how genocide looks like.
Right.
Okay, we're just doing everything we can to prevent civilian casualties.
Now, people need to understand that war is horrible, right? War is it's messy. It's just awful. But yet, war is never clean and nice. But Israel right now, probably most Americans probably don't realize this, but Israel right now has done such a good job. I've recently read how they have the best ratio to killing combatants to not having collateral damage. And that's with the bad guys, the evil people of Hamas that murdered your babies, raped your teenagers, and so much worse. That's with those bad people hiding behind civilians. And yet, Israel is able to keep the collateral damage to a minimum, better than probably anybody else has ever done in the history of war. That's not genocide. Now, is there collateral damage? Of course, there always is in war, and you better believe there's going to be collateral damage when evil uses civilians as shields, which is further evil, right? But yet, the IDF goes above and beyond to be careful to keep collateral damage to a minimum. Anything you'd like to say about that?
Just to add, to give some historical background. So in 2005, Israel pulled out of Gaza. We expelled the Jews. We basically created a Palestinian state, and we gave them billions of dollars to create their country, to make the best country they could ever make. Yeah. And what did they use the money for? Creating tunnels. Yeah. Creating terror cities underground, under hospitals, under schools, and buying ammunition and rockets. As we left Gaza, they started firing rockets at Israel. Jesus. Very soon. There was no siege, there was no blockage before that. As they started, then we had no choice. We have to protect our country. So this claim of you've been holding them as captives and your siege and you have to free Palestine. No, we have to free Palestine from Hamas, not from Israel, because we did everything we asked for. We gave them the land, we gave them money. Here, build your country, do the best you could, but they used it for terror.
Yeah.
Nothing else.
You mentioned that this was the worst attack against the Jews since the Holocaust. I'd argue that in some respects it's worse, at least per capita. At least I've heard it said that at least the Nazis knew what they were doing was evil and tried to cover up the Holocaust, tried to cover up at first the concentration camps. They tried to dispose of the evidence. They didn't want the rest of the world to know what was going on. But Hamas infiltrates Israel, sexually assaults so many women to death, beheads babies, burns babies in their cribs, tortures people and then kills them, and then takes them takes so many captive, including some Americans. And they do all this with while recording it and then putting it out on social media to brag about it. In that sense, it's worse because at least the Nazis knew deep down what they were doing was evil. Hamas is parading this and is proud of it. And so in that sense, I think it's worse. It's not as bad like per, the amount of people that were killed. But believe me, viewers watching, if they had the opportunity to kill all of you, they'd do it in a heartbeat. Don't you think that's right?
Yeah, and I'll just say we didn't want this war. This war was forced upon us. Okay, this war is not about cleansing the Palestinians or from Gaza, destroying them. This war is about preventing another 7th of October. We just can't allow another one. We can't allow that on our border. There's these savages and this terror organization that all it does is thinking and planning how to do all those stuff that you just described. We just can't allow it. So this war is a necessary war. It's morally necessary to fight them. And if you say that this war should stop, you're basically saying Hamas should survive and do it again.
Right. Yeah.
Because they will do it again. They say it.
Mm-hmm.
They say it all the time.
Yeah, we hear Americans constantly yelling that there needs to be a permanent ceasefire over there. And I tell folks who are saying that, said, then you are siding with Hamas, the modern day Nazis. You are siding with them because that will allow them. What's that?
We've tried ceasefires all the time. We've tried ceasefires. We've tried it. Yeah. It doesn't work.
Right. Yeah. And the fault is always on one side of that issue, right? I mean, how many peace offers and negotiations have been offered where Yasser Arafat or whoever else just walks away from the negotiating table? It really seems to me that there's one side that wants peace and there's another side that wants death, and Israel is on the side of peace. Paul says, as far as it's up to you, do all that you can to live alongside one another. And I feel like Israel has done that as far as it's been up to them, as far as it's been up to Israel. But there comes a point where you're just like, okay, they are just not willing to live in a peaceful relationship with us. And so it's not just that, but if you're going to come in and kill our women and children brutally, then this is the most loving thing to do, is to hit back and hit back hard and wipe out Hamas. Now, the big issue is, what do we do with the children there? They've been indoctrinated. The first words they hear are anti-Semitic and that the Jews need to be killed. Tell us more about that, and how do we get around that? How do we solve that problem?
Yeah, so we have an example in history. Nazi Germany, when they lost the war, there was a time of denazification. External government had to just clean everything. Clean the brainwashing of Nazism, and I think that's what should happen in Gaza, and not only in Gaza, also in Judea and Samaria, and as it's called, the West Bank. They are taught the same. So there has to be just a reformation. People need to stop hating Jews. They need to stop thinking that Jews are pigs that need to be slaughtered. We found in Gaza, soldiers found in Gaza books written by Hitler's book. I don't remember its name, Mein Kampf or something, where he basically lays out his plan of murdering the Jewish people. We find those books in their homes. That's what they read. That there has to be a change in their mindset if we want to progress to peace. We have to change their doctrination.
Again, talking about what's going on here in America, everybody is quick to condemn Nazis, but especially younger college students, but then quick to side with the Palestinians here, Hamas, which, by the way, the majority of Palestinians support Hamas. Is that correct?
Unfortunately, that's correct.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, 70% of Palestinians think that 7th of October was justified.
Right.
So
yeah. So it's
reality. I mean, I wish it wasn't true, but that's the sad reality.
Right. And it's ludicrous to me that when you see these college students, and they'll be comparing me to a Nazi, by the way, but then they'll side with Hamas, and I'm like, no, you are actually siding with modern day Nazis. You can't get more similar to Nazis. You have the same goal. Hamas and Nazis had the same goal. And so, yes, this is, I mean, Hitler would be very proud of what Hamas has done, and he would be the first to side with Palestine. So that should get our attention. I'm just really concerned about these lies that have been spread here in America and around the rest of the world, and that so many, especially those who have not been trained in critical thinking, are just accepting. It's scary. It's a cancer here in America, and if it's not dealt with, it could destroy us from the inside. But you've got this external threat attacking you from the outside here, and it's hard for me to even imagine what it must be like for you to say, yeah, I'm probably getting drafted in October, and I'm going to be on the border of Egypt, right in the mix of all of this. Is that scary, or how do you feel about that?
Well, we're just used to it. Everyone who served in the military just developed this sense of, okay, whatever, because I won't lie. I am worried about my family, about my life. I'm married, I have a son, but you are used to it when you do it for a long time. And we live here in a reality where the constant mindset is just surviving. So you're just used to this type of life.
Wow. We can't relate to that as Americans. And I hear you say that, and I have already respected you. You don't understand the respect I have for you, brother. I'm so proud of you, and just continue to pray for you. And to those watching this, please keep Eli in your prayers. He's going to be on the front lines here in a few months, and we'll have you on more to tell us about what's going on here. But let me get to some other questions. We also hear by the media in America that there's been around 35,000 civilians who have died in Gaza. And isn't that just a horrible number? Because, Hamas didn't kill that many Jews. So, yeah, what's up with this? Is that tell us about this approximate, this 35,000 Palestinians who have died.
Yeah, so you should remember that those numbers are controlled by Hamas. So he tells us how many civilians are dead, and he doesn't tell us how many Hamas terrorists are dead. So we should remember that. But basically, even if 35,000 civilians, if that's a correct number, we know that half of them, half of them are terrorists, okay? And that means that it's the lowest ratio of collateral damage in history of urban warfare. Think about the war in Afghanistan and Iraq. For every one terrorist, 9 civilians were killed. Okay,
by American.
So again, this shows that the IDF just does everything it can to prevent innocent death and make sure that civilians don't die, only terrorists, because that's why we're fighting. We're fighting to prevent those terrorists to attack us again. We don't have anything against the woman or against the baby or against the elderly. No, we're fighting against those Nazis, Hamas terrorists. Okay, so again, this number, you have to remember, half of them are terrorists, and we know it.
And should we even, I mean, I have a hard time. I mean, and our media doesn't even bat an eyelash at the numbers that Hamas gives them. But when you have people who are willing to do what they did to your people, to women and children, to babies, why should we trust them when they give us any numbers?
Do you want to those people who raped and beheaded babies? I mean, why would you want to listen to them? Right. I mean, we for sure there are civilians who die, for sure, but don't be quick to just trust anything they say. Be very skeptical of what Hamas says.
Yeah,
very skeptical.
Amen to that. I'm skeptical. I mean, that's just good epistemology, right there. But I also hear, but look, Israel is bombing and targeting hospitals. I mean, isn't that a war crime? I mean, what's up with Israel going after the hospitals in Gaza?
Yeah. So, according to international law, if hospitals are used as terror base, they lose their legitimacy. It's not a hospital anymore. Okay. Yeah. So it just loses its protected status.
Yeah.
And we know that hospitals are used as terror base. Why? Because our soldiers are killed there fighting the terrorists. Many soldiers died in hospitals fighting Hamas terrorists, and that shows that Hamas even uses hospitals as terror bases. So Israel's fighting in hospitals in Gaza doesn't negate international law. It's actually according to international law. Okay, we're justified doing that.
Why do you think the entire world freaks out over a little strip of land that's smaller than New Jersey, a small state in America? Why does the entire world freak out over this little strip of land that most people would say is in the middle of nowhere, but it seems to be the epicenter of everything? What's up with that?
That's a 1 million question. I have no idea. It's a mystery. It's a great question. I cannot answer that. I have no idea. I have no idea why.
I've thought about that a lot because it doesn't make sense. Just doesn't make sense. And why the entire world holds Israel to such a crazy high standard that they don't hold anybody else to. If anybody else was attacked like that by terrorists, it seems like the rest of the world would say, get them all. Kill all the terrorists, make sure that never happens again. We're on your side. But it happens to Israel, and all of a sudden the entire world's like, okay, guys, you're held to a higher standard than everybody else. And you guys are like, all right, we'll play by those rules and we're going to win anyway. But how many soldiers have you guys sacrificed because you're willing to play by those rules? Where, as you said it, on October 7th, that night, Israel could have been like, all right, here's your genocide, and leveled the place. But you didn't. You took a lot of time, which was actually detrimental, probably, to you as far as world support goes, because you might have had more support just going in that next day, but you didn't. Why?
Because they were preparing. They were also preparing for us.
Yeah, they were preparing for you, and you wanted to be careful. You didn't want collateral damage, and you tried to be tactical about it. Yeah.
I meant Hamas was preparing. So 3 weeks before we started invading Gaza and fighting them, they had the time to prepare for us. So it's if we wanted to do just everything quickly, we would do it. If we wanted to kill everyone, we would just do it in a couple of minutes. But we took the time, to notify Gazan civilians, hey, you need to move, take your stuff and go away. It's a warfare. It's a terror base. And I'll tell you something. Every home the IDF enters, every home has ammunition, has rockets. It's crazy. Think about it. Every home, almost every home in Gaza is used as a terror base.
Now, is that just Palestinian civilians in general?
I mean, in Gaza, in Gaza, basically, in this
Okay.
war, the IDF
But
found in every house ammunition.
we're not talking about just those who are in Hamas.
Oh,
But
no,
just
no, no, no. We're talking about civilians that Hamas is so embedded within the civilian population that you just find it everywhere, in schools, in hospitals, in mosques, everywhere. So whenever you hear in the news, the IDF just bombed the mosque, the IDF just bombed the hospital or a school, you need to ask why.
yeah.
Why did it happen? Maybe there is a reason for that. Maybe, just maybe.
Well, a week or two ago, I put a video on Facebook of this 19-year-old Jewish girl who was kidnapped. I don't know if she's still alive, but she was obviously sexually assaulted brutally. She had gray sweatpants on, it looked like, and you could just see blood all over below the waist, to put it bluntly. And then you could see that her Achilles tendons had been cut so that she couldn't run.
That's a soldier. Yeah, that's a soldier.
That was a soldier?
It was a soldier they took. Yeah. If you
19-year-old.
saw, if you've seen recently, there was a video posted of Hamas terrorists taking soldiers, female soldiers. So that's one of them.
It just, it breaks my heart and makes my blood boil. I want to go join the IDF when I see that. But what really got my attention is they took her out of the back of this Jeep, and you have all these Palestinian citizens there cheering and praising Allah for that. That's not just Hamas. It is the culture there. Like we said, they've been brainwashed. They've been indoctrinated into this. But that is what we're dealing with, what you're dealing with right now. And it does need denazified. And that's going to take a lot of work after you guys wipe out the current threat in Hamas, then changing the minds, which it's so hard to even get somebody who's indoctrinated to even question the fact that they were indoctrinated. So that might be the biggest problem. What do you think?
I will also add that in the third wave of the invasion to Israel on the 7th of October, these were civilians entering houses and raping women and killing, beheading. So civilians were involved in the attack. It's not just the Hamas, official terrorists. It's also the civilians, many of them who participated, and as you said, were cheering and glad for that attack.
Yeah. I want to get back to that question I asked about why everybody cares so much about this little strip of land that's seemingly in the middle of nowhere, but seems to be the epicenter of everything. And do you think, when I defend Israel, I never try to make a biblical case. I know a lot of people do. Like the promises that God made to Israel, there's no expiration date on those, and I hear both sides of that debate. I argue, I'm like, look, if this was Sweden, we would need to protect Sweden. If this was Mexico, we would need to protect Mexico. It's just, I say it's not a political issue. It's not about right or left. It's about objective morality that's north and south. And what we've seen here is objectively wrong. But do you think it goes back to why so many people hate? It seems like so many people around the world are so anti-Semitic and just hate Israel for no reason. Do you think it's because of those promises God made to Israel in the Old Testament that would make some people just freak out over it? I'm just grasping at straws here. What do you think?
I'm not sure about that. I will say that I do think there is a spiritual reality to it, to anti-Semitism. Just look at the history. Anti-Semitism is not it's not a current event or phenomenon. It's been there throughout history, for thousands of years. The Jews have suffered almost everywhere, and every time. So there is a spiritual reality to it, I would say, demonic reality even.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. It is. What happened on October 7th was just satanic. Now, another thing I'm getting sick and tired of hearing here in America is, you ask, well, wasn't that horrible what happened on October 7th? Do you condemn that? And you'll hear so many people saying, well, it's complicated. You got to understand the history. And so almost saying, well, of course you can understand why the Palestinians would react like that and burn babies in their crib and cut heads off of toddlers and rape women to death. Really, is it complicated, or is that just objectively evil and nothing justifies that? But tell us, what's your response to, well, it's complicated?
I would just ask, what context would justify burning a whole family alive? What context? What context would justify raping a 12-year-old young girl and then killing her? What would justify those actions? I mean, even if you are not pro-Israel, even if you think that Israel is an occupying force, do you think those actions are justified, even if we're an occupying force?
Yeah.
And if you say yes, I think you need help. I mean, I wouldn't argue with that person. I mean, it's just intuitive that no, it's terrible. It's gross. Why would you do that? I mean, so I don't argue with those people who just, debate that.
I was talking to a young man from Southern California not long ago. Awesome Christian. He's taking his theology and his apologetics and philosophy seriously. But when it came to matters relating to Israel, this was after October 7th and just a couple months ago, actually. And he told me, and I just have so much respect for this young man, but he said, Tim, in Israel, they are just as bad to Muslims. The things that Hamas did to Israel, they're already doing to the Muslims. You can't be a Muslim and step foot inside Israel. And I said to my friend, I said, brother, that's just false. He goes, oh no, it's not. I've seen this I've heard this in the media. And I said, I've been there. I know that what you're hearing is false. I know how it works. I said, who do you think runs Israel on the Sabbath for the tourists who are there like me? It was Muslims that loved living there, who would even identify as Palestinian but love Israel. And I said, these Muslims there, these Arabs, have the same rights. Israel recognizes, the government of Israel recognizes their God-given rights and protects them just as they would Jews who live there. He just did not believe me. And I could tell him, look, I've been there. I've seen it with my own eyes. I have friends in Israel. I know what's going on. He wouldn't believe me because he was believing the media who was lying to him. Am I right about that? I mean, does Israel recognize the rights of Muslims in Israel?
We have Muslim judges, in Supreme Court. And we have Muslim officers in the IDF. I think that will do. I think that's enough.
I think you're right.
That it's just ignorance. Okay. I don't want to be mean, but that's just ignorance.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well, sadly, there's so much ignorance in America right now regarding Israel and even around the world. So, I don't have a huge platform here, but I hope that people that see this video share it, just so we can start to get more truth to the masses. Because right now, these lies have infected the world, and it's a cancer that will ultimately destroy us. And the only cure is truth. And so we need to speak truth and get truth out there more and more. That's why I'm so just so happy that you're on the show right now. I hope this leads to bigger platforms for you. Man, I can't wait to get back to Israel. I would go there. If I had a plane ticket, I'd go tomorrow. Is it safe? I mean, I don't want to say it's safe, but what would you say? In fact, I've been talking to my old tour guide, and we are talking about setting up another trip. Would you recommend coming to visit you right now?
Well, for sure, there are areas that I wouldn't recommend visiting, like in the north or in the south, like near Gaza. But the rest of Israel is pretty safe right now.
Yeah.
Say, yeah.
Jerusalem.
I would say, yeah.
Yeah. Are you still living in the Tel Aviv area?
Right now, I live in Yokneam, which is a city close to Haifa. So I'm kind of in the north more, yeah.
Oh, you're in the north, so
like 20 minutes from Haifa, but far away from the war with Lebanon right now. So
okay, and yeah, but you were living in Tel Aviv when I was there, right? Or not too far away?
I'm living not far away from Tel Aviv. Yeah, not far away.
Tel Aviv just reminds me of America. I think when we went there, we came in and spent some time in northern Israel, and then traveled over 10 days south. Spent a lot of time in Jerusalem. That was just an amazing experience. But by the time we got to Tel Aviv, I was like, oh, I felt like I was in Los Angeles. We were on the beach. There was extra high waves going on. Brett Kunkel was there. He jumped out, started surfing.
That's what I felt when I was in LA. That I'm in Tel Aviv or something.
Did you really? Yeah. Yeah, and it's actually kind of a more liberal place as well. Ironically, you probably have many Jews who would have been pro-Palestine, at least before October 7th, in the area. What, am I right about that?
Well, for sure, there is a dispute about Judea and Samaria and whether there should be a Palestinian state. But almost everyone in Israel right now agrees, at least, that we have to fight Hamas until they're gone. Everyone agrees about that.
Right. You've been unified. You've got Benjamin Netanyahu is currently in command right now, but who's his political rival right now?
That would be Yair Lapid. Yair Lapid is in the opposition.
So they are political rivals, but even they are unified in this right now, and they're I can't remember the term, but there's some way the government is operating right now to where they're both kind of working together to lead the nation, right?
Yeah, it's in emergencies. That's what happens sometimes. And also, I would say there is a dispute between them, Yair Lapid and Netanyahu, about what should be done with the hostages. Should we give up more? Should we maybe stop the fight for some time and get the hostages back, or should we just continue fighting and press Hamas until they're released? So there is a dispute. They both agree that we should finish Hamas. Okay.
Yeah. Well, I think you. If it were up to me, if anybody cares, I say just go in and destroy Hamas and don't let up. What do you think? If it was up to you, what would you say? Who would you side with there?
Yeah, that's a hard question. I do want the hostages to go back.
Oh, yeah.
I'm just not sure what's the best way to do it. And I just, I pray for my leaders that God will give them wisdom. It's a very complicated issue. I wouldn't want to be on their place. I wouldn't want to be Bibi Netanyahu right now or anyone else there.
Yeah.
So it is very complicated, and they need wisdom to do what's best.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely want to see the hostages freed. I worry that not many of them are still alive, but I know they've got to have some. It's just a horrible situation. I do want to see them freed, and then I want to see Hamas just annihilated from the planet. It's just some of the worst evil this world's ever seen, and it's not complicated. After the Holocaust, you didn't hear anybody say, "Oh, well, it's complicated because you got to understand World War I, and what led up to World War I really led to World War II. And when you understand what Germany was going through, it gets all complicated. You can see it's justifying it." Nobody was justifying it. They crossed the line of good and evil. And so, I've said to one person online, I was debating a pro-Palestine person, and he was saying that the Palestinians had right to the land of Israel, not the Jews. And I said, don't you think that the Jews should have right to live in the same cities that they built? we know that they built these cities. Shouldn't they live in the same places that their ancestors built? But I said, on top of that, even if the Palestinians had any moral high ground before October 7th, they lost it all, and they've relinquished any moral right to the land after that. Just like Nazis lost any moral right. And that's why Chief Justice Jackson was able to condemn the Nazis and convict the Nazis at Nuremberg, because he said they violated the law above the law, which really gets us into the moral argument, and that it's God who provides this law above human law. But clearly Hamas has violated the law above the law. And what's scary is they think they've kept the law, the law above the law, because of their Islamic beliefs, which is clearly antithetical to not just Christian view of God, but the Judeo-Christian view of God. Anything you'd add to that?
I would just say that fighting Hamas is a favor to the Palestinians as well. Many of them are suffering under Hamas, and they hate Hamas, and they want Hamas gone, but they can't fight him. So fighting Hamas is not only our what do you call it, in interest. It's not only for us. It's for Palestinians as well, and for their better future.
Yeah, I think you sent me a video of some aid that I think we or Israel had sent to Gaza, and Hamas was taking it and not giving it to the Palestinian people. So you had some Palestinians, civilians, going to these truck beds trying to get some food for them and their families, and then Hamas just starts shooting them right there.
It didn't happen just once. It happens basically every time. Every time we give them aid, Hamas just steals it and just kills its own people. And you know what we do? We protect the Palestinians in Gaza so that they can have, so that they can get the food and get the medicine. And so we sacrifice our soldiers so that they can get their aid. So we're fighting Hamas again. As I said, we're fighting Hamas not only for us, but for Palestinians as well.
Wow. All right. So we have a question that just came in here. And I just do want to encourage people watching to send in some questions right now for Eli. But he says, why was Rafah bombed? Wasn't it supposed to be a safe area for civilians?
Well, in Rafah, there are safe areas for the Gazan civilians, so they move all the time. Okay, what happened yesterday or the other day, as evidence are now increasing, what happened is that 2 kilometers from the Palestinians, from the civilians, Hamas officers were meeting terrorists were meeting together, and then we killed them with a precise rocket that shouldn't have killed the other Palestinians. It was 2 kilometers away. You can transfer it to your measure in English, but it's pretty far away, okay? With a precise rocket, killing the terrorists. What happened was that by mistake, a fragment of the rocket hit Hamas ammunition, okay, which killed the civilians.
Yeah. So
Israel,
there was
Israel,
secondary. Go ahead.
yeah, it was a secondary explosion
Yeah.
that wasn't targeted by Israel. Wasn't targeting the civilians. Again, we have no interest in killing civilians. How would that prevent another 7th of October? No, we're killing the terrorists. But what happened is that, again, everywhere in Gaza, you have ammunition that Hamas embeds. So every time we bomb, there is collateral. There can be collateral damage. And again, for us, it's tragic. It's tragic that civilians die. For Hamas, it's tragedy. It's not tragedy. It's tragedy because then international, the international governments press Israel, stop the fight, which helps Hamas survive.
Yeah.
So Hamas has every interest that its own civilians die.
It's just evil on top of evil. But yeah, when you see those secondary explosions go off, you also see that. I mean, okay, then that's a terrorist stronghold. Also, it's not like there's these free spaces that they're not using. Seeing these secondary explosions go off is further evidence that they're hiding, and that they're using civilian neighborhoods as shields. So, in my opinion, it seems to justify the Israeli attack there.
Again, civilians' death is a tragedy, okay? But for Hamas, it's tragedy. Strategy.
Tragedy versus strategy. That's hard to say.
Yeah.
Tragedy versus strategy. There you go. Yeah. All right, here's another question from Darren. Thoughts on Preston Sprinkle promoting the Bethlehem Bible College district ongoing narrative that we in the West need to repent for supporting Israel? So I hadn't heard that about Preston Sprinkle, but let's suppose this is true. I would totally disagree with him on that. What would you say, Eli?
Repent for supporting a democratic country that wants peace? Yeah. I mean, what would you prefer supporting? Savages and evil people who want to rape and behead little babies? That's what you want to support? Just think about it. I mean, commonsensically.
Right. Yeah. Even if it wasn't a biblical issue at all, and I don't recommend that we get into the biblical support. I think like we talked about earlier, I think there's something spiritual, something satanic going on here with Hamas and the hatred of Israel. But it's just common sense. When you see anybody attacking somebody else like that, a good person. Now, I've studied the theology of love quite extensively because of its relationship to free will, and also in its relationship to answering the problems of evil. And a person who loves another always seeks to protect. And so, if you love a person, you seek to protect that person. And when somebody is attacked by evil, sometimes the most loving thing you can do is to stand up and destroy that evil so that it doesn't happen again. If this is happening if you're a dad and you have kids in your house and one of your kids is attacked horribly by the guy down the street, and you see he's got plans to continue doing so, you do whatever it takes, even if the police department isn't going to do anything about it. Then, first you're going to call for help, and if they're not going to do anything about it, then a good dad will do whatever he can to make sure that his kids are safe. And if the best option is to go and put an end to that guy's evil, then that's the most loving thing you can do. Anyway, if that's what Preston Sprinkle is saying, I think he's deluded. I think he's mistaken in a horrible way. And any Christian ought to stand with anybody, not just Israel, but anybody who is being attacked like you guys are. We got another question here. Why use bombs at all if there's a risk of additional explosions being triggered? Can the IDF not use soldiers on the ground to attack directly if they know the locations of the enemy? That's going to get really tricky, especially with those tunnels. But how would you answer that?
Yeah, basically what you just said. In Gaza, okay, you have to understand there are cities under the ground, cities that are built for terror. Soldiers can do nothing about it. Okay, if you get soldiers there, the tunnels are still going to remain. You have to bomb those tunnels. You have to bomb those areas. No choice. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good question, and really good answer. Eli, we've been here for over an hour. I know you don't have a ton of time. People watching, send us your questions because we do need to start wrapping this up. Eli, do you have a little bit more time?
Yeah.
All right, cool. Here's my buddy Cole. He says, how can boots on the ground expect to get in with the tunnels? They can see soldiers coming, and Hamas is not an official military. Hamas dresses up as civilians. That's a good point. How would you answer that or add to that?
I'll need to read it again. So how can boots on the ground expect to get with the tunnels? They can see soldiers coming, and Hamas is not an official military. Hamas dresses up as civilians. Can you explain what he's trying to, what point is he trying to make?
I think he's kind of just, yeah, he says here it's not really a question, more of a response. I think he's kind of just agreeing with you here, saying, hey, boots on the ground isn't going to get that done. It's just not a good tactical situation there. Cole, you can let me know if we're getting you right or wrong there. Darren asks, how should we respond? How should we respond to the Palestine Christian that does believe October 7th has justification? Okay, so how should we respond to the Palestinian Christian that believes October 7th had justification?
I would just describe what happened on October 7th, because honestly, to be honest, if someone thinks that it's justified, I don't think he knows what happened. I don't think he knows what he's talking about. I think he just imagines Hamas fighting with IDF soldiers.
Yeah.
That's not the only thing that happened on October 7th. You just need to look at their videos, Hamas videos, and just read what happened. And then you'll get an idea. And then if you still think it's justified, as I said before, I think you should get help. Seriously.
When I was in Israel, I had the opportunity to go into Palestine-controlled territory. And interestingly, our tour guide, who was Israeli, had to get off of our bus before we entered that territory because he wasn't allowed in there. Is that called the Area A? Is that right?
Oh, yeah.
There's A, B, and C.
Israelis cannot enter the Palestinian territories. No, yeah. you don't want to do that as an Israeli because you'll probably be killed.
Right. Yeah. So our own tour guide with this bus full of American philosophers and theologians said, okay, guys, you're going into this territory right now. I'm not allowed in there. So see you later. I've got another friend who's Arab who can go in there. And so he got in there. These guys are friends. and this Arab continued our guide, our journey into Palestinian controlled territories. And I had the opportunity to talk to Palestinians. Interestingly, I'll never forget this one conversation I had. It was with a guy who was a Palestinian Christian. and I think this is probably not the norm, but he was very anti-Israel. And I said, what would you do? I mean, very anti-Semitic, even though he was calling himself a Christian. He was raised as a Christian. And I said, but don't you realize that you have brothers and sisters in Christ? I was talking about guys like you, Eli. Brothers and sisters in Christ who are Messianic Jews. You both follow Jesus. That makes you brothers in Christ. Why do you want to kill them? He goes, and he says, yes, they are my brothers in Christ. We must kill them. And I'm like, what? And it's like, for right now, this is our land, and even they're just part of the, his view was that just part of the problem. We'll sort out the details later. It blew my mind. I was like, I could not accept that answer. He was the only one that I heard that from, but are you shocked by that response?
Well, again, so to be fair, not all Palestinians, not all Christian Palestinians hate Jews and want them dead, for sure.
Yeah.
But there are many Christian Palestinians, unfortunately, who actually support the attack. They support what happened on October 7th. It's documented. There is a video of a famous pastor in Bethlehem who said that he was encouraged or something. I'm paraphrasing, but he was surprised by the resistance, the force of the resistance of the Palestinian people or something on October 7th. He was inspired or something. I'm paraphrasing. Wow. That's despicable. That's crazy. That's what Jesus would say. Are you sure about that?
Yeah, right. Jeez. All right. Cole has a question here. He says, I've heard IDF has a near 25% friendly fire rate due to their extreme caution to not kill Gaza's civilians. Have you heard any about this? Any comments?
Can you just explain what a friendly fire rate is?
I am guessing that he means that a quarter of the fire that IDF soldiers take is from friendly fire from their own forces, as opposed to Hamas. And that becomes a problem when you're trying to be extra careful. And America has had those problems too in our recent battles. Pat Tillman, famously, a NFL superstar, quit the NFL to go fight after 9/11. And imagine a military full of athletes like that. But he was in special forces and was killed by friendly fire. So I think that's what he's talking about. He says hitting themselves here as a follow-up.
Yeah, it's just a very hard situation. You have to think about those soldiers not sleeping well, not eating well, not seeing their homes for months. And mistakes happen, accidents happen. We accidentally killed 3 hostages running away from Hamas. That was a mistake. We didn't aim to do it, but that's what's ugly about war, that accidents happen.
Yeah, I don't think it seems like so many Americans just their view of war is what they've seen in a few movies and on video games. And there's no they get to leave the movie theater. They get to restart the video game. And so they don't understand how horrific war is, and that it's messy and that mistakes are made. I don't understand in the way that people that actually experience it do, but I try to be careful to have somewhat of a working knowledge, even if it's not experiential knowledge of it. But yeah, war is horrible. And I think we in America need to do more than get our understanding of war from video games. But let's continue with some questions here. Let's see. Let's go to this one again from Kramagori. He says, October 7th seems like an attack that could have been easily prevented it seems to some people that Israel let the attack happen on purpose in order to justify furthering their war. Thoughts? I mean, I think that's crazy. But what do you think?
I actually agree. Yeah, the attack could have been prevented. We should have finished with Hamas much earlier. That's what I would say.
Yeah,
that's how it could have been prevented.
So, I mean, so are you referring to the Accords in 20 years ago that left? I mean, would you have given? I mean, obviously, hindsight is 2020, but how do you think Israel should have handled giving the Palestinians their own controlled territory in Gaza, and then saying immediately that, hey, we're being shot at as we're leaving them to their own devices, and then the continual missile strikes? I mean, October 7th didn't just happen in a vacuum.
Giving Hamas money, billions of dollars throughout the years. They've used this money to create tunnels and to get stronger and plan this attack. So as soon as Hamas took control in Gaza, and Hamas, since its inception, has sworn to annihilate Israel. They say it every time. They say it publicly. They're not ashamed of it. Okay, it's for some reason people in the West are ashamed of it, but they're not ashamed of it. They claim it publicly that they want to destroy Israel. So the only way to prevent the 7th of October is to finish with Hamas. What other way? What other way do you have? Can you suggest any other way? Please do.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I hear all of these suggestions and demands without ever any other alternatives. This is how you should be doing it. If you just do it this way, you'd solve all the problems. No, that never happens. But I'm glad you brought up the point that this is in, I like to say that America's philosophical foundations and theological foundations are based upon the idea that all humans have objective and unalienable rights given to us by God, and that these objective and unalienable rights ought not be violated by anybody, including governments. In fact, it's the government's job to protect these God-given rights. All right, so that's America's foundation. I think Israel has something, I don't know if it's stated so clearly, but Hamas's philosophical foundations, it's clear. Kill the Jews, right? Am I right about that?
Yeah, not only in Israel, by the way. Israeli intelligence prevents terror attacks by Hamas in different countries, in Europe, in Asia, in different countries. Hamas's aim is not only destroying the state of Israel. They are anti-Semitic. They want to kill Jews in general. Okay?
Well, here's an interesting question. Is the UN objectively evil? What do you think about the UN?
I would say the UN is just messed up completely. I mean, I don't know if they're objectively evil, but they are just messed up completely.
They're objectively messed up.
They're probably just ignorant about what's going on here. I mean, if you assign the Iranian guys to be to be responsible for human rights, I mean, come on.
Yeah.
In the UN, it's just messed up.
Let's since the UN was brought up, let's talk about Israeli history. I mean, we can go all the way back to the Old Testament, but we don't need to do that. But Israelis, the Jews were displaced a long time ago, all right? And then it was after World War II, and I believe this was led by the UN, correct me if I'm wrong, but there was world support after World War II because of the Holocaust. What's that?
Yeah, a vote.
Yeah, because of the Holocaust, because of what the Nazis had done to the Jews, to allow Jewish people back to Israel to have their own state, right? Because after all, there's tons of archaeological evidence showing that Israelis, that Jewish people built this land. These cities were built by Jewish people. And so at that point, because after Israel had been dispelled violently a long time ago, now they were able to come back to the land, and that's when more of the modern day conflicts started. But the UN at that point seemed to be objectively good in its inception and really made that happen. It seems over the decades, they have been infected by lies as well, and now seem to be oftentimes opposed to Israel. But did I get my history, my history in a nutshell correct? Anything you'd add to that?
Oh, that's basically it. Yeah, that's basically it.
Let's see. Darren asks another good question. At this point, is there any realistic hope for a two-state solution?
You know, I hope there will be peace with the Palestinian people, in the sense that there'll be two states living in peace, loving each other, you know. But right now, we have to face reality. We're surrounded by people who just want to kill us. Again, 70% of the Palestinians supported the 7th of October. So before talking about the two-state solution, we have to talk about the de-Hamasification, as I said before. Instead of denazification, we have to do a de-Hamasification. Children have to be stopped, stop to be taught that Jews are pigs, that they need to be killed. They need to be taught that Jews are people as they are, and then that we need to respect them as human beings. We need to live in peace with them. And as soon as that happens, sure, why not? But right now, it's just practically impossible.
You know, I know that a two-state solution is possible if terrorists aren't running the Palestinian state. And the reason why I know that is because I've been there and I've seen how Jews and Muslims live together in Israel. And like you said, there's Muslims on the Supreme Court of Israel. There's Muslims, high-ranking officials in the IDF. There's Muslims all over the place. 20% of Israeli citizens are Muslims who are practicing Muslims, and many of whom would identify as Palestinian. And they love Israel. I've talked to Muslims myself who love Israel, and they love the fact that their rights are protected by the government, where that's not going to happen anywhere else on that side of the planet. You know, so don't tell me Jews and Arabs can't live at peace with one another when I see it when you see it every day with your own eyes, and I have seen it with my own eyes. Yeah. So, but it's not going to happen when you have guys like Yasser Arafat in charge of the negotiations on the other side of the table.
I would just say, to be fair, that the Palestinian Authority, is not Hamas. Okay, we're not talking about the same thing. They're actually enemies. Okay, when Hamas took power in Gaza, it just expelled the Palestinian authorities. They pushed them out of the roofs, killing them, some of their officers. And actually, the Palestinian authorities sometimes helps the IDF catch terrorists in the Judea and Samaria, in the West Bank. So there is some cooperation, but they're just inconsistent. They do pay income. They do pay the terrorists who are arrested. They do pay their families and stuff. There is hatred towards Israel. So there does need to happen a reformation before it can be done.
Yeah.
The process.
Well, let's get into kind of a theological question here that's related. Kramagori, hope I'm saying that right, asks, are modern Jews God's chosen people? Isn't the true Israel of the Bible Christianity as a whole according to the New Testament? Is a physical state of Israel strictly necessary for God's plan? That's a great question.
I would say I would start with the second question: is a physical state of Israel necessary for God's plan? I do see promises in both in the Old Testament and the New Testament when the disciples they ask Jesus in Acts 1:6, is this the time when you restore the kingdom in Israel? And he says, it's not for you to know the times. He doesn't say, what are you talking about? It won't happen. Yeah. The
Right.
church is Israel.
Yeah.
There is still a future plan of restoration, national restoration, and spiritual revival for Israel in Israel. You know, Jesus said he's going to come back to Mount of Olive, you call it?
Yeah.
Mount of Olive. I do see this state as a precursor to God's accomplishing His plans for Israel. And I would say that no, I don't say that every Jew just by flesh is part of God's people. No, I would say God has one people, which includes different nations with different responsibilities. So God, in one people, God has Gentiles, and He also has Jewish believing Christians or Messianics who are ethnically Jewish and also spiritually Jewish, because spiritually Jews, I would say, are the Jews who believe in Christ. They're the true Jews. Okay, I wouldn't call a Gentile believer spiritually Jewish or something. I think when Paul talks about spiritual Jews in Romans, I think it's 9 and 3 or 4, I forget. He talks in the context about Jews. So to be true Jewish is to be a Jew who believes in Jesus. So a Jew who believes in Jesus is part of God's chosen people.
Yeah. Now, I've thought about this a lot. I've been really studying the whole Israel issue quite a bit since probably 2007. And, my views have vacillated. I've gone back and forth as I've looked at the different views on does Israel still play a role? Does God have a plan for Israel as as far as that nation, that piece of land goes? And what does that mean to say that Israel is God's chosen people? I do think I lean toward the idea that God's not done with the nation of Israel and the land there. I don't see an expiration date to those promises. And I do think that God's not done with Israel. Now, a lot of people jump to the conclusion, are you saying that all Jews are saved? Like, no. How did you reach that conclusion? I'm saying Jacob I loved. All right. Let's go to Romans 9. Right. We can get into the Calvinist interpretation, which I think is totally wrong there. I think what God is saying there is Jacob I loved, Esau I hated. Now, Esau ended his life right with God. I think Esau is in heaven. And so hate in that sense doesn't mean the kind of hate that we're thinking of. I mean, obviously, Jesus told us that we have to hate our parents. Okay, that doesn't mean actually hate them. You have to understand the kind of what Jesus is saying there. He's like saying put God first, and by saying hate your parents, that means put them second, right? When I think, and maybe I'm wrong here, but I think when he says Jacob I loved, Esau I hated, he's saying I'm choosing Jacob. I'm choosing his line to bring forth Israel that will bring the Messiah to save the world for everybody, right? I'm choosing Israel. And I don't think that God is done with Israel. Now, that doesn't mean that that just because somebody is Jewish that they're saved, because they can reject God just like anybody else can. But I do think that God's still. I'm going to say I think that it's probably the case that God's not done with Israel. What do you think?
Yeah, I would actually want to answer the question that Darren Piles Plies just asked if you can bring it
Is
on.
it this
It's a
one?
great question. Yeah, if you can read it.
That one right there. All believers grafted into 100% Jewish olive tree, Romans 9-11.
Well, Paul doesn't call it a Jewish olive tree. Notice he talks about all believers being grafted into the olive tree.
Mm-hmm.
But what's the purpose? What is he talking about in chapter 11? To make Jews jealous, to bring them into salvation. So the whole purpose of this grafting is to bring the Jews back.
Oh, wow.
And that's the point in chapter 11. The point of Paul in chapter 11 of the discussion in chapter 9-11, actually, I personally actually don't think that chapters 9-11 are primarily about soteriology. So I take a different approach from most interpreters who see like election to salvation. I don't see election to salvation. The discussion is about Israel's role, and the Gentiles' role in God's plan. So the whole purpose of the conclusion in chapter 11 is to say that God is not done with Israel. He's faithful, and He's using the Gentiles to bring them back, to revive the Jewish people.
Let's look at a few others here. So Cole again says, I haven't read these. I'm just clicking on them here. So the kingdom is physical, given to Israel, and will ultimately bless all those who believe in Jesus. Romans 9-11 promises that Israel is the opposite of cut off. What would you say to that?
And the kingdom is physical, given to Israel, and will ultimately bless. Israel is the opposite, cut off. Yeah, well, I would say that Paul's point in chapter 11, Paul does say that unbelieving Jews have been cut off. And again, I think the olive tree represents mediatorial role of being representative of God in the world. That's how I interpret the olive tree. I don't take it as being about soteriology. I don't think that's the discussion. It's about being God's representative in the world. So it's about roles in God's kingdom.
Mm-hmm.
So the unbelieving Jews are taken off the tree. But the whole purpose of grafting in Jews and grafting in Gentiles to the tree is, again, to make the Jews jealous, to bring revival. So that's the purpose.
Are you jealous of me just a little bit?
Yeah, I am. I look at your muscles and I'm like, I'm so jealous.
Whatever. No, I'm kind of jealous of you too. It's a good relationship there. All right, let's keep going. He says the scriptures give not one example of a Gentile who believed and is then identified as a part of Israel. Take Ruth, for example. Comments?
The scripture give not one example of a Gentile who believes and is then identified as a part. Take Ruth, for example. I would say the Bible consistently distinguishes between Jews and Gentiles. They never call, the scriptures never call Gentiles as Jews in the New Testament. Yeah. Never. Right. The Jews always contrasted with the Gentiles.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
All right. Cole adds, the whole point of Romans 9-11 is I just explained from Romans 1-8 how sure you can be of God's promises. And Paul says, I know you're about to ask, what about Israel?
Exactly. Yeah. Cole got it right. Read the last portion of chapter 8. He's talking about eternal security, assurance of salvation as well. And then a question arises. How do I know God will remain faithful to me, Paul, if God abandoned Israel? And then he spends 3 chapters talking about God's faithfulness to Israel. It's not about election to salvation and stuff, Calvinism, Arminianism. It's about Israel.
Right. Yeah.
That's the point.
Yeah. It's interesting how this is related to the Calvinism discussion. Exactly. I think Calvinists get this wrong. That's not what Romans 9 is talking about here.
And one primary reason they get this wrong because many Reformed people hold to replacement theology.
Yeah.
And that's why they replacement theology just affects your soteriology. That's what I would say.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, man, I've I've been careful when I'm in these conversations to not defend Israel through scripture. At least, if I'm talking to pro-Palestinians on the college campus, taking them to scripture isn't going to help. What I've been focused on is just objective right and wrong. If you think what the Nazis did was objectively evil, then you should not stand with Hamas right now. You need to be pro-Israel. But it's interesting how there is biblical connections here, and theological issues rise to the top. But man, I've had you on here for over an hour and a half. I told you we'd probably just go for an hour, so I feel like I need to let you go, Eli. But how would you end our conversation today? Would you give us any last words of wisdom here in America? What can we do for you and Israel?
The first thing to do is to think critically. Don't believe anything you hear in the news. Examine claims. And then when you know the truth, just promote it. Just tell the truth, okay? Promote the truth and defend the truth. That's what I would say.
Awesome.
And the truth will set you free.
Hey, who said that? I think I heard somebody say that once. I read it somewhere. John 8:32 rings a bell. So, how can we pray for you?
Pray for my friends who are fighting right now in Gaza. My dear friends who are believers, actually. Yeah, that's what I would say. Pray for them.
Okay. Yeah, let that sink in. We have Christian brothers who are fighting the evil of Hamas right now. We will be praying for them. So, man, thank you for being here today, Eli. Please stay connected with me. Let me know how things are going. Let me know if you get drafted. I know you're ready and willing. We'll be praying for your wife and your son as well. And I hope I get to see you. Yeah. So if you get drafted in October and the EPS is in November in San Diego, IDF will let you go?
I believe they will. Yeah.
That's awesome. Okay. Well, I'm praying that I get to see you in person and break bread with you again in November in San Diego. So, yeah. All right, brother. Thank you so much for being here. And hey, if you're watching this, help us get the truth out. You can do that by liking this video, sharing it, telling people to come watch Eli, to come listen to him. And Eli I'm sure more questions are going to be coming in. I'll keep you informed, and we'll probably schedule a part 2 sometime in the near future. How's that sound?
Sure. I'll be glad. Thank you so much.
God bless you, brother. And to everybody watching, as I always say, stay reasonable.